Outside, the winter wind threaded its way through every street, like cold fingers brushing against the city's skin. A quiet but persistent reminder that the world could be as unforgiving as it was beautiful. But inside the Grand Horizon Hotel, it was a different universe. Warm golden light poured gently from crystal chandeliers, touching every polished marble surface with a soft glow. The scent of cedarwood and cinnamon hung in the air like a familiar memory. Subtle, comforting, grounding. The man didn't go to the front desk. He wasn't looking for assistance or a warm welcome. Instead, he moved with quiet certainty toward a secluded corner of the hotel lounge. There, he wrapped his weathered hands around a steaming cup of coffee and sat down slowly, as if sinking into a memory. No one gave him a second glance. No one recognized the man beneath the worn Carhartt jacket, the scuffed boots, and the navy baseball cap pulled low over his brow. And yet he was someone many people had read about but would never recognize in a crowd. His name was Jackson Reeves, 48 years old, founder and CEO of the Grand Horizon Hotel Group, a name once printed in bold on the cover of Fortune with the headline, "From bellhop to billionaire." But tonight he wasn't a billionaire. He wasn't the visionary CEO with expansion blueprints and a media team. Tonight he was just Jake again, a man stripped of title and image, walking quietly back into the bones of something he once built with his own two hands. A man chasing a feeling he hadn't touched in years. Around him, the hotel whispered to life. Quiet conversations hummed at nearby tables. Glass clinked against glass, and footsteps crossed the gleaming floors in measured rhythm. It was a kind of music, unwritten, unplanned, almost cinematic. But then, rising gently through that background noise, he heard it. A voice. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was honest, and it was trembling. Bell said he'd sleep in the car. But tonight's our anniversary. I just wanted one thing. Just one thing. To feel like we're still normal people. Jackson's head turned slightly, not enough to draw attention, just enough to focus his gaze. By the fireplace, a young couple sat close together. They didn't wear clothes made for luxury. Their jackets were layered but tired, like they were trying to stay warm more than they were trying to impress. A canvas bag rested at their feet. Their hands were locked together, not out of romance but survival, and their eyes told stories no one their age should have lived through. They didn't know he was listening. They didn't know that the man sitting a few steps away from them had the power to rewrite their night, maybe even their future. But Jackson wasn't looking at them like a savior. He wasn't moved by pity. What he saw, what stopped him cold, was a reflection. He saw himself. He saw the 20-year-old version of who he used to be, working night shifts in a motel outside Peoria, sleeping in the supply closet when winter made the roads too dangerous, saving every dollar to keep his mother's lights on. He remembered the meals skipped, the cold showers, the noise of old pipes in cheap places that barely felt like shelter. There were no flashbulbs that night, no cameras, no reporters. But in that small, unguarded moment, something began to shift deep inside him. It wouldn't be long before that moment would blossom into a decision, one that would change his company forever. Just a few weeks later, the Grand Horizon Compassion Initiative was quietly born, a multi-million-dollar fund dedicated to helping struggling families, displaced individuals, and everyday people simply trying to get by. It was never meant to be a campaign. There was no social media rollout, no interviews. It wasn't for show. It was a promise, a quiet, unwavering promise. If you have the power to help, then you help. No spotlight, no credit, just impact. Years later, in a rare interview, a journalist would ask Jackson what had inspired the initiative. He'd smile, lean back in his chair, and reply with calm certainty, It wasn't a business decision. It was a decision made by the heart. Outside, Chicago's night fog wove around the street lamps like threads of silk, softening the edges of the city. And inside the very hotel he once dreamed into existence, kindness was already blooming again. Quiet, invisible to most, but deeply real. The grand horizon Chicago stood among Jackson's most personal triumphs. More than a building, more than a luxury hotel, it was a monument to everything he had clawed his way up from. Nestled between a historic theater and a luxury art gallery, the building stretched 20 stories high into the frosted sky, its glass shimmering like a sacred space, born of steel and persistence. He paused just inside the lobby, taking in the details with a quiet reverence. The amber glow from pendant lights curved downward, illuminating the white marble reception desk. Velvet lounge chairs were arranged near the fire in intimate clusters, inviting conversation or silent reflection. A lone pianist played from a corner, the melody drifting gently through the warm air like a lullaby. Jackson let it settle in him, like oxygen returning after a deep breath held too long. Then slowly he stepped forward to the front desk. A young woman turned toward him with a bright but gentle smile. Her name tag read, Tessa Collins. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to Grand Horizon. Do you have a reservation tonight?" He nodded, voice calm and quiet. "Jake Reeves." She typed briefly, her fingers moving smoothly. He added, "One night, King Room, 11th floor." She handed him a dark navy folder, embossed with the Grand Horizon logo in silver. "The elevators are just past the sculpture to your left, and if you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to ask." Jackson nodded again, the ghost of a smile beneath the brim of his cap. "Thank you." He walked toward the elevators, passing a massive metal sculpture mounted beside the wall, a piece he'd commissioned years ago from a struggling Chicago sculptor who had been turned down by every gallery in the city. The artist's work was rough, unfinished, filled with exposed angles and uneven lines. Jackson had loved it immediately. It looked like memory, raw, fractured, Inside the elevator, his reflection stared back at him. Unshaven, weathered, dressed like someone he'd almost forgotten, yet never truly left behind. When he opened the door to his room on the 11th floor, nothing surprised him. The space was exactly as he had designed it. Warm walnut paneling, soft linen textures, blackout curtains pulled back to reveal a panoramic view of the city skyline. It was perfect. But he wasn't here for perfection. Not tonight. He set down his canvas bag on the bed, then turned and left. Back down in the lobby, Jackson moved quietly, making his way toward the West Corridor Cafe. It was just after 9. The place was still, voices hushed, silverware tapping gently against porcelain. He ordered a black coffee and found a seat in the farthest corner. From there he could see without being seen. He could feel the room. As steam curled up from his mug, rising like a question without words, he heard it again. He said he'd sleep in the car, but tonight's our anniversary. I just wanted one thing, to feel normal. Jackson didn't move, not a breath. But inside, something already had. The voice was quiet, soft enough that it might have gone unnoticed, spoken not to be heard by the world, but to soothe the trembling heart of the woman who uttered it. There was no expectation that anyone was listening, but it struck something inside Jackson, a place he hadn't touched in years. He tilted slightly, barely enough to draw attention, just enough to hear her more clearly, and then the next words came, and time slowed to a halt. The young woman wasn't complaining. The man beside her wasn't venting. Their voices were tired, worn thin by long roads and short breaths. And yet, in their tone there was something unmistakably human, an honesty that can only come from living too long without expecting help from anyone. The man's name was Noah. He explained that they had planned to stay with family, but a ruptured gas line had forced the building into evacuation. Every nearby place was booked, except for the Grand Horizon, the closest one with a vacancy. Jackson didn't lift his head. He simply held his coffee tighter, not to drink, but to stay grounded. Inside, something old stirred, a memory long dormant, waking. Then came her voice again. Lily. Softer now, like she was speaking to him and herself at the same time, trying to find strength between sorrow. "You said you'd sleep in the car," she murmured. "But today's our anniversary. I couldn't let you do that." There was a pause, a silence that seemed to hold its breath. Then came the tremble in her voice, the crack she couldn't stop. "I just wanted one thing. Just one. To feel like we're still human." Jackson felt a tightness in his throat. He didn't need to see their faces. Their words were too raw, too unfiltered. They weren't making a scene. They weren't asking for anything. They were simply reaching for a sliver of dignity in a season of life that had robbed them of almost everything else. Noah responded, his voice slow and gravelly, weighted by quiet resignation. "We'll make it work, even if we empty the account." Lily's reply wasn't laced with hope. It came from something deeper. "Love. Just one night," she whispered. "So we remember we're still people." Jackson placed his cup down slowly, cautiously, as if he didn't quite trust his own hands. Steam rose from the surface, delicate and fleeting, like grief too long held in silence. They weren't here to indulge, to celebrate, or to splurge. They were here because they had nowhere else to go, and in that circumstance they still chose to hold onto something beautiful. No one else noticed, but Jackson did. He heard the sound of a chair leg sliding across the floor. Noah stood and quietly walked toward the front desk, likely to ask about checkout time. Lily remained behind, sitting straight, gently smoothing the fabric of her coat. She wasn't falling apart. She was holding herself together the best she could, trying to turn this displaced night into something that mattered. Jackson remained in his seat, but his mind was no longer in the present. It drifted back, years ago, to the nights he spent sleeping in his car, the protein bars in the glove compartment that counted as dinner. The one time he'd spent $30 he didn't have to book a motel room for his mother's birthday because she had just completed her final round of chemo and she deserved a bed that didn't smell like bleach and despair. That memory returned with the force of a wave crashing against stone. He leaned forward slightly, eyes fixed on the coffee mug now gone cold. In his mind, he saw the young man in that motel room, saw the weight, the silence, the quiet ache of trying to survive in a world that never offered room to breathe. Tonight, in this quiet cafe tucked inside the hotel he'd built, Noah and Lily, two strangers with no idea who he was, had brought him home again. Not to a place, but to a purpose, to the root of the dream that built all of this. Not wealth, not success, but the chance to do good, to be kind, to remember. Jackson stood. He didn't say a word. Didn't look back. He didn't want to interrupt. Didn't want to become part of their story. Instead, he walked silently toward the hallway near the elevators, passing by the front desk, already knowing that tomorrow a decision would be made and everything would begin to change. Behind him, the cafe gradually returned to its rhythm. But to Jackson, nothing sounded the same. Because when a man spends his entire life building a business on the foundation of care and comfort, and then one night he sees that care being lived in its most unpolished, unbranded, unfiltered form, he cannot walk away untouched. Not if he still remembers the man he once was. And that night, Jackson remembered, not just the hunger or the endless math of making it through another week. He remembered the rarest gift of all, a night where someone could feel safe. A night that didn't demand they explain themselves. A night to rest. Deep inside, he knew what he'd witnessed between Noah and Lily wasn't a random moment. It was a mirror, and it would change everything. He didn't return to his room. Not right away. Instead, he wandered the lobby slowly, like a man tracing old footsteps, eyes catching details he hadn't really seen in years. The curve of the marble reception desk, the wood grain in the floorboards, the way light shimmered off the chandelier above the fireplace. The hotel still shone with elegance, still met every expectation of its 5-star rating. But after that night, it all felt different. Eventually, his feet led him to the mezzanine level, where a quiet hallway displayed a series of black and white photographs from the hotel's earliest days. Jackson had once hand-picked each image, not because they were polished, but because they told the truth. The rough beginnings, the relentless labor, the dream slowly rising from the dust. He paused before one photo he hadn't looked at in years. In it, a younger version of himself stood in the middle of a construction lot, face streaked with cement dust, sleeves rolled up, determination burning in his eyes. There had been no elevator back then. He had hauled every mattress to the second floor by hand. He remembered the smell of wet drywall, the silence of empty rooms waiting for a future. Back then, even one night in a real hotel had felt like a fantasy. He hadn't grown up with vacation memories or crisp white towels or room service. He'd slept on the pull-out sofa in his mother's one-bedroom apartment, listening to neighbors argue through thin walls. And when she got sick and the bills started piling up, Jackson had dropped out of community college and taken whatever work he could find. Carpet cleaning, scraping gum off sidewalks, delivering newspapers at 4 a.m., folding towels past midnight. He remembered counting coins for gas, pretending not to be hungry when his friends ordered food. And he remembered, with sharp clarity, the night he gave up almost everything he had for a hotel room. Not for him, but for his mother. Because after her last chemo, she deserved one night to feel like her pain hadn't stolen everything. That memory hit him like thunder beneath still water. He leaned in closer to the photo. There was pride in that young man's face, but there was desperation, too, the kind born not of ambition, but survival. Now, he wore $1,000 suits. He signed off on renovation budgets that dwarfed what his family had earned in 10 years, but in chasing scale, had he lost the soul of it all? Noah and Lily weren't exceptions. They were the reason he'd started all of this. Not for the elite who ordered champagne from iPads, but for families like his, people who scraped together enough for one night, just one, where the sheets were clean, the noise stopped, and they could remember how it felt to simply exist. He moved to another photo, an early shot of the first Grand Horizon lobby. No chandeliers, no gold trim, just a scratched front desk and a second-hand coffee pot. But the people in that picture were smiling. Staff looked exhausted, yes, but alive, real, rooted. Something inside Jackson shifted. Not anger, not guilt. Awareness. He returned to the lobby, this time seeing it through a different lens. The front desk attendant gently fastening a coat button for an elderly guest, a housekeeper pushing her cart with quiet care, a father kneeling to adjust his daughter's scarf before heading into the cold. This was the heartbeat. Not the marble, not the thread count, the people. And if he didn't do something more than symbolic gestures, then all those years of sacrifice, every sleepless night, every promise, would mean nothing. He stepped into the elevator, and once again caught sight of his reflection in the polished steel door. Older now, grayer, but beneath it all was still the boy who once gave up his own pillow so his mother could sleep. The elevator moved, but he didn't press a floor. He let it climb, as if somewhere between the numbers clarity would arrive, And when it did, it wasn't a feeling. It was a calling, a whisper from memory. And tomorrow, he would answer. They chose a small table near the wall, one just out of reach of the sunlight, a quiet corner, removed from the noise and the light, like a pause in the middle of the world. Noah pulled out the chair for Lily, and she smiled. Not a smile for show, not the kind you wear when people are watching. It was real. Worn, yes, but filled with quiet gratitude. Jackson watched them from a distance, his coffee cooling in front of him, steam curling upward like something sacred. He saw the way they arranged their breakfast, one croissant, split in half, two hard-boiled eggs, a single apple sliced and placed between them. Nothing extravagant, nothing wasted, every bite shared with intention. And that was enough. He took one last sip of his coffee, then rose from his seat and walked toward their table. Not rushed, not casual, but with quiet respect. "Mind if I sit for a minute?" he asked, his voice warm, unobtrusive. Noah looked up, momentarily surprised, but there was no edge in his eyes, only a worn openness. "Sure," he said, nodding. "Go ahead." "I'm Jake," Jackson said as he pulled out the chair. "Just passing through." "Noah," the young man replied, extending his hand. "This is Lily. Good to meet you." Their hands met. Noah's grip was firm, rough from work, the kind of hands that carried weight without complaint. Lily's touch was softer, but steady, with a strength that didn't need to raise its voice to be heard. There was an awkward pause at first, the kind that comes when strangers share a space usually reserved for privacy. But Jackson didn't force the silence away. He let it breathe, stirring his coffee gently, allowing the moment to settle. Eventually, Noah leaned forward like he couldn't carry the weight of the story any longer. "We didn't mean to stay here," he said. "Lily's cousin's apartment had a gas leak. They evacuated the whole building. We were already in the city when we found out," Lily added. Her voice was quieter now, edged with a kind of tiredness that went deeper than sleep. "There wasn't time to figure anything else out." "This was the only hotel nearby with a room," Noah said, almost apologetically. "We didn't realize how expensive it was. Not until after we checked in." Jackson gave a small smile, not amusement but recognition, the kind that says, "I know this road." "Chicago can be like that," he said gently. Lily looked down, her fingers smoothing the fold of a napkin. Then she looked back up, voice lower now, almost protective. "He offered to sleep in the car," she said. "But today's our anniversary. I just didn't want to remember it from a parking lot." Jackson leaned in slightly, resting his elbows on the table, his eyes kind. "You made the right choice." And with that, something shifted. The door between strangers cracked open. Noah began to open up, not with complaint, but with truth. He worked as a mechanic in Joliet. Long hours, hard work, no benefits. He'd recently picked up extra shifts at a second garage after his mother had been diagnosed with congestive heart failure. The hospital bills didn't stop, even after she moved into subsidized housing. Lily taught part-time art at a public elementary school. On weekends, she sold watercolor prints online. Most of what she made went right back into buying paper and paint. They'd been engaged for almost 2 years. Every time they tried to set a wedding date, something got in the way. Money, illness, emergencies. Life. "It's not the way we planned it," Lily said quietly. "But last night, it still felt like a gift." Noah nodded beside her, his voice barely above a whisper. "Even just one night where we didn't feel like we were failing." Jackson didn't interrupt. He listened, not with pity but with presence, with a kind of listening that can only come from lived experience. "You remind me of my parents," he said eventually. "They didn't have much, but they had each other, and they taught me more about resilience than any degree ever could." Lily smiled softly, Her eyes glistened, but she held the tears back with dignity. Jackson stood, sensing it was time to let the moment close where it belonged. "Thanks for letting me sit," he said. "I'll leave you two to enjoy the rest of your morning." Noah looked up. "You didn't have to go." "I know," Jackson replied, "but you deserve this moment." He turned to leave, then paused, just for a second. "If you're still here tomorrow morning, try the sourdough pancakes. They're not on the menu, but they'll make them if you ask. Just say Jake recommended them." Lily tilted her head, a flicker of curiosity lighting her face. "Do you come here often?" Jackson smiled, eyes soft with memory. He'd seen 1,000 mornings rise in this very space, but only a few like this one. "Yeah, well, then he was gone, blending into the quiet stir of a hotel waking gently. The hiss of the espresso machine, the soft roll of suitcase wheels on stone, the low voices of travelers caught between destinations. But this time, Jackson didn't just walk away with their story. He carried something deeper. A reminder that sometimes one quiet table for two could speak louder than any boardroom ever could. The lobby began to shift into its mid-morning rhythm. Footsteps echoed over polished marble. Luggage wheels clicked steadily over tile. The sound of hushed conversations filtered through the space, soft and composed, as if the very architecture demanded elegance wrapped in silence. But Jackson wasn't watching the guests. His eyes were fixed on the front desk. The Legionnaires out of region stood in front of Tessa Collins. Sharp navy blazer, posture poised but not rigid. She was one of the newer hires, someone who hadn't yet been through a full calendar year with the company, but she had already caught Jackson's attention. Not for flash, for consistency. The kind of quiet excellence that doesn't shout but is always there. A presence that made people feel seen, even when they didn't know they needed to be. Jackson approached from the side, shoulders slightly hunched beneath his jacket, just another man looking like he might be checking out early. But Tessa, trained to read people before they spoke, turned toward him with a practiced, gentle smile. "Good morning, Mr. Reeves," she said. "Was everything all right with your stay?" He nodded slightly, voice low and composed. "Perfect, actually. I just need to ask a favor, something discreet." Her expression didn't shift, just one subtle nod, calm, reassured. "Of course." Jackson leaned in, keeping his voice under the rhythm of the room. "There's a couple checking out in the next hour. Noah Bennett and Lily Monroe. They're in room 1117. Tessa tapped a few keys, her tone still smooth. "Yes, I see them. Scheduled to check out at 11. "I want you to comp the entire stay," Jackson said. "Room, taxes, everything. Quietly. I want their card refunded, no mention of me. If they ask, just say a guest overheard their story and wanted to extend a kindness." Tessa blinked, only once, but caught herself quickly. She was good. "Understood," she replied. "And one more thing," Jackson added. "Make them a dinner reservation tonight. Rooftop, window seat. Tell them it's complimentary, but again, no name." She hesitated just slightly. "If they ask who?" "They won't, but if they do, just say the guest left before they could be thanked." Tessa absorbed that. There was weight in it, more than policy. A choice made not for optics, but for meaning. "I'll take care of it," she said softly. Jackson offered a brief smile, one of trust. "I know you will." And then he turned, walked away, disappearing once more into the quiet hum of the hotel. He didn't leave. Not yet. He waited. Because sometimes the most important part of a moment is watching how it ends. "Good morning, Mr. Reeves. Was everything to your satisfaction?" Jackson nodded softly, voice low and calm. "Very much so. I just need to ask a small favor. Discreetly." Tessa's expression didn't change. She gave a slight nod, eyes steady, open, and ready. Her professionalism unwavering, her intuition quietly active. "Of course, sir." Jackson leaned in slightly, his tone dropping into something more intimate, just between them. "There's a couple checking out within the next hour. Noah Bennett and Lily Monroe, room 1117. Tessa's fingers moved lightly across the keyboard, the soft click of keystrokes almost lost in the hum of the lobby. "Yes, they're scheduled to check out at 11. "I'd like to comp the entire stay," Jackson said, his voice even. "Taxes, fees, everything, and I'd like the charge reversed on their card. Quietly, no announcement. If they ask, tell them a guest overheard their story and wanted to do something kind. That's all." Tessa blinked, just once, briefly surprised, but quickly returned to her poised self. She was good at this. "Understood," Jackson added, almost as an afterthought, but one weighted with intention. "One more thing. Make them a dinner reservation for tonight. Rooftop, window seat, complimentary, but don't mention my name." She hesitated, a rare flicker of uncertainty in her voice. "What if they ask, sir?" "They won't," Jackson said. "But if they do, tell them the guest left before they could be thanked." Tessa nodded slowly, the gravity of the moment settling in her eyes. She understood. This wasn't just a gesture, it was something deeper. "I'll take care of it." Jackson gave her a brief smile, a private one, filled with quiet trust. "I know you will." Then, without another word, he stepped away. No fanfare, no need for attention. Just a man blending into the motion of the morning crowd, anonymous once again. A passerby with somewhere to be. Except, he didn't leave. Not yet. Instead, he lingered behind one of the marble columns, pretending to examine the hotel's floor directory. But he wasn't reading it. He was waiting. At exactly 10:53 a.m., he saw them. Noah and Lily stepped off the elevator, rolling their bags behind them. Noah's coat was buttoned halfway, collar turned slightly askew. Lily held a paper coffee cup in one hand, her room key in the other. They looked tired, but in that strangely peaceful way that follows emotional exhaustion. As if last night had granted them a few precious hours of borrowed stillness. They walked up to the front desk. Tessa greeted them just as she had greeted Jackson earlier. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett, Ms. Monroe. I hope your stay was everything you needed." Lily offered a soft smile, her voice warm but worn. "It was lovely, thank you." Noah handed over the room key. "We're checking out." Tessa tapped through the reservation, then paused, just slightly, and looked up with a practiced gentleness. "Actually," she said, her tone calm and kind, "there's been an update to your booking. A guest overheard your story yesterday and wanted to extend a small act of kindness. Your entire stay has been taken care of, and dinner tonight, rooftop window table, is also complimentary." Noah blinked, caught off guard. "I'm sorry, what?" Tessa gave a small smile, the kind that offers both warmth and professionalism, balancing closeness with grace. "They didn't leave a name. Just a note. Tell them kindness still exists." Lily's hand flew up to cover her mouth. Her coffee cup wobbled, nearly spilling, and she steadied it with both hands. "We didn't expect—" "You don't need to say anything," Tessa said gently. "Just enjoy the gift." Noah didn't cry. He didn't falter. He just stood there, head bowed slightly, and nodded. Slowly, almost reverently, as if the weight he'd been carrying had lightened enough for him to stand upright for the first time in days. "Please," he said, voice thick but steady. "Just thank them for us, even if they don't want to hear it." Tessa gave a single nod. Message received. As they turned to leave, Lily reached out and took Noah's hand. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. He squeezed her hand back, firm and silent. That was enough. From behind the column, Jackson watched them step out through the glass doors. Noah pulled their bags, and Lily paused at the threshold, glancing back once, just once, at the chandelier, as if trying to take a final photograph with her heart. Jackson didn't follow them. He didn't need to. He remained where he was, hidden in plain sight, standing inside a space he had built, one that now gave something greater than rest, a place where dignity had room to breathe. And in that moment, Jackson understood something simple but immovable. The biggest decisions a CEO ever makes don't happen in boardrooms. They happen in silence, in spaces where no one claps, no one takes credit, and no one even knows. And in that quiet, he realized something else, something unshakable. One night had changed their lives. But first, it had changed his. There are moments that pass like a ripple, light as breath, small as a whisper, but stay with you forever. One night, one room, one passing conversation that shifts the entire course of a life. And if even one hotel in one city on one night helped someone wake up the next morning with their shoulders a little less heavy, that would be enough. Jackson pulled out his phone and made a call. "Hey Brenda," he said, "I just sent you a document. I want it implemented across all properties. Front desk teams will need training. Quietly, no press release. We do this one the way it's supposed to be done." Brenda didn't ask questions. She'd worked with him for over 15 years. She recognized the tone in his voice. This wasn't a proposal. It was a return to purpose. Jackson hung up. Then he looked down at the yellow legal pad in front of him, the one where he had scrawled a question that had haunted him for weeks. What if one night could change everything? He picked up a pen and crossed it out. Underneath, he wrote something new. It already did. That morning, spring light slipped through the glass towers of Manhattan like a promise, low, golden, and new. Inside the flagship Grand Horizon Hotel on Fifth Avenue, the grand ballroom had been transformed. No branding, no screens, no corporate banners. Just soft lighting, fresh flowers, rows of chairs, and one name on the invitation that had stirred more curiosity than clarity. Horizon Hope, a quiet launch. Guests arrived in small waves. Regional managers, property GMs, longtime staff. Most thought they were attending another leadership summit, a new system, maybe a rewards program. Nobody quite knew what to expect. Then, as the doors opened one final time, two more guests slipped into the room. Noah and Lily. She wore a navy blue dress with a pale gray shawl. He wore a blazer, borrowed again, just slightly too big in the shoulders. They didn't know anyone here, but as they were led to their reserved seats in the third row, Lily leaned in and whispered, "Why are we here?" Noah shook his head. "I don't know, but I think we're about to find out." The lights dimmed. A single spotlight lit the stage, and Jackson Reeves stepped into the light. No suit, no title card, no teleprompter. Just a dark shirt with sleeves rolled up, and a man who looked like he had something to say and didn't want anyone else to rewrite it. "Thank you for being here," he began. His voice was clear, grounded, honest. "I won't take up too much of your time. I just want to tell you a story." He paused, just long enough for the room to lean in, and then continued, voice calm but resonant. "A few months ago, I visited one of our properties in Chicago. Not as a CEO, not with a title, just as a quiet traveler. I sat in the hotel cafe that night, and I overheard a conversation behind me. There was no need for notes, no script. The memory had been etched into him like a scar that healed wrong, but stayed to remind. They weren't celebrating anything, they weren't indulging in luxury. They were there because the place they were supposed to stay had a gas leak. The building was evacuated, there were no other rooms left nearby. The man offered to sleep in the car. The woman answered, "But today is our anniversary. I just want one thing, to feel human again." His voice caught ever so slightly on the word human, and in the pause that followed, you could feel the stillness ripple through the crowd like wind through tall grass. They didn't ask for help, they weren't putting on a show. They were simply trying to carve out something beautiful from a moment that had already taken so much from them. Jackson's eyes moved across the audience, slow and deliberate, until they landed on the third row, on Noah and Lily. The spotlight softened slightly, but the moment somehow sharpened. "They reminded me why I started this journey in the first place," he said. "Not to build a name, not to chase numbers, but so that every person, no matter what life has thrown at them, could have one night, just one, where they could breathe again and remember they still matter." Lily's fingers tightened around Noah's. He straightened in his seat, eyes wide, breath suspended. "And that," Jackson said, "is where Horizon Hope was born." He reached down and closed the small folder in front of him, a symbolic gesture, like turning the page on a chapter that had taken too long to write. "This isn't a public campaign. There will be no press release. Every property, every front desk, each one now has access to a quiet fund. For people in crisis, health, finances, emotional strain. One night, one breath, one whisper to say, 'You are not invisible.'" Then he looked directly at them. "Noah, Lily, if I'd never said it properly before, thank." The room didn't breathe. Heads slowly turned, one by one, toward the couple in the third row. Wide eyes, motionless. Lily stared at Jackson like she was seeing him for the first time, and in a way she was. Noah didn't speak. He didn't need to. The emotion sat heavy in his chest, too big for words. Jackson stepped off the stage. He moved down the aisle and reached them. He shook Noah's hand, firm and grounded, then gently took Lily's, smaller and trembling. "I told you those sourdough pancakes were real," he said with a soft grin. Lily laughed, unable to stop the tears in her voice. "It was you were him." Jackson gave a small nod, not theatrical, not grand. "And the two of you reminded me of who I still am." After the room had emptied and the applause faded, Noah and Lily remained seated, not out of confusion, but reverence. Because now, that one night, that nearly forgotten evening in the cafe, had become something more, something real, something with weight. It had become the reason hundreds of others might one day experience what they had once thought impossible. A night of dignity, a space to exhale. A quiet reminder that yes, one night really can change everything. Months later, Noah and Lily received an invitation to the official Horizon Hope launch event. Flights to New York were arranged, a room reserved for them at the flagship Grand Horizon on Fifth Avenue, and only then, stepping into the event, guided to the third row, did they finally learn the truth. Jake, the kind stranger in the cafe, was Jackson Reeves, the man behind the entire Grand Horizon legacy. When Jackson took the stage and spoke about how their story had sparked this new initiative, the entire room stood to applaud. But Noah and Lily were the first to rise, not out of pride, but because they understood now, more than ever, that their resilience had mattered. Their story had changed someone, and in doing so, it had changed everything. That's the story. I hope it touched something quiet in you, something true. And if it did, I invite you to subscribe to Moments of Quiet Truth, where we believe that the human spirit is never truly defeated, only waiting for a small moment to rise again.